They say every mother gets her moment at her child's wedding, the front row seat, the smile from across the aisle, the quiet nod that says, "You helped build this." So I picked the dress he once said made me look like someone from an old TV show, the soft pink one with pearl buttons and pleated sleeves. I baked his favorite walnut bread, ironed the same cardigan I wore when I dropped him off at college. I wasn't expecting speeches. I wasn't expecting fanfare. But I thought, no, I believed there'd be a chair with my name on it. I believed I still mattered. And when I saw what they'd left for me instead, something inside me cracked. Quiet, but final. I raised Ellis mostly alone. My husband Charles was a good man, but his job with the forestry department meant weeks away from home. So I handled the homework, the science fairs, the birthday parties. I was the one Ellis called at 1 a.m. when his first girlfriend broke up with him, the one who sat on cold bleachers in January cheering him through 3 losing basketball seasons. We weren't rich. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom cabin on the edge of Birch Lake in northern Minnesota, but I made sure he never felt small. Every decision I made back then was for him. I took a second job cataloging old books at the library just to afford Ellis's college fund. When Charles was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, we kept it quiet so Ellis wouldn't worry during finals. Charles passed 2 weeks after Ellis's graduation. He didn't make it to see his son walk, but I clapped loud enough for both of us. After Charles passed, I kept the cabin just the way he left it. His boots stayed by the door for over a year. I still dust his armchair every Saturday. People say that's not healthy, but I never listened. That house isn't just wood and nails, it's memory. It's the sound of Ellis learning to read in the living room, the echo of Charles's laugh when he burned the Thanksgiving turkey, the quiet clink of coffee mugs in the morning before the sun touched the lake. Ellis moved away after college, first to Duluth, then eventually to St. Paul. We didn't talk every day, but when we did, he always ended with "love you, Mom." I held on to that when he called to say he was getting married. He sounded different, polite, but distant. Said her name was Melanie. They met at work. She's incredible. Mom, organized, smart. She gets things done. I asked about the wedding, what kind of ceremony, what help they might need. He said it would be small, elegant, nothing too formal. I offered to bake for the rehearsal dinner, and he said, "That's sweet. We'll let you know." I hung up with a strange feeling in my stomach. Not quite pain, not quite pride, just something unsettled. But I stayed hopeful. That's what mothers do. I cleaned the entire cabin top to bottom. I aired out the guest room in case they ever visited. I polished the picture frames in the hallway, mostly old photos of Ellis, some of Charles. One of the 3 of us from a trip to Lake Superior. I even took down the cracked frame and replaced it. I remember thinking, maybe this wedding is a chance to start fresh. Maybe Melanie just hasn't had time to get to know me yet. Maybe this is the moment we all sit at the same table again. I went into town and bought new stockings, hemmed the sleeves of my dress, and even got my hair done for the first time in 5 years. The salon girl said I looked vintage beautiful. I smiled all the way home. I baked 2 loaves of Ellis's favorite walnut bread and wrapped them in parchment. It was silly, maybe, but it felt like bringing a piece of our history to his new beginning. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't need a microphone. I just wanted him to see that I showed up, that I was still here. The night before the wedding, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the wind ruffle the lake. I whispered, "Charles, if you're listening, please let this weekend be a good one." I arrived early. Of course, that's who I am. The resort was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood beams, those fancy little glass lights strung from the ceiling. I walked into the lobby and gave my name. The girl at the desk looked down and handed me a small name badge. It read, Bernice Elwood, nothing more. No ribbon, no mother of the groom. Just my name, printed like I was a guest at a business conference. Still, I smiled. I clipped it on and stepped into the main room. I scanned the tables. Bride's family. Groom's co-workers. Melanie's college friends. My name card just said Bernice. My table was near the kitchen doors. I was seated between a CPA and someone who ran a podcast about interior design. Nice people. Didn't know Ellis. Didn't ask. I watched as the guests laughed and clinked glasses. I saw Ellis smiling beside Melanie, whispering into her ear. They looked happy. That should have been enough. But my chest ached in a way I couldn't name. No one asked me to speak. No one brought me to the dance floor. I sat in my seat, fixed the hem of my dress twice, and folded my hands. The bread I'd baked never made it to the table. I saw it later, still wrapped, sitting near the catering staff's coats. By the time I slipped out the side door, no one noticed. Some stories begin with betrayal, some with a scream. But mine started with silence, with a chair I thought had my name on it, and a son who didn't save me a place. Some people call this a slow heartbreak. I call it the beginning of a revenge story, just not the kind you'd expect. Not loud, not cruel, but quiet, intentional, and completely mine. The thing about being quietly erased is no one notices until you're already gone. You sit there, breathing the same air, holding the same last name, and yet somehow you become the one who doesn't count. And the hardest part, you're not even sure when it started. I sat at that table for what felt like hours. The music swirled through the air, soft jazz and piano covers of love songs. People smiled and toasted. They shared stories, clinked champagne glasses, took selfies, and whispered about how beautiful the bride looked. And there I was, Bernice Elwood, clinging to a linen napkin like it was my last tie to belonging. No one asked me who I was. No one said, "That's Ellis's mom." I must have smiled 100 times. That tight, practiced smile you wear when you're trying not to cry in public. I kept reminding myself, you're here. That's what matters. But that's not entirely true, is it? Being there doesn't mean anything if no one sees you. When they passed around the microphone for speeches, it started with Melanie's father, then her brother, then her old college roommate told a story about tequila shots and dorm room breakups. Laughter rolled across the hall like waves. People leaned in. Someone even wiped a tear from their eye. And then, like it was a joke, someone said, "What about the groom's mom?" And Melanie laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just casual. "Maybe later," she said. Then she moved on. I remember sitting up straighter, waiting, thinking maybe this was part of the plan. Maybe Ellis had something to say. Maybe he was saving the best for last. But nothing came. He didn't even glance my way. It's funny, I wasn't expecting much. But somehow, being ignored still found a way to hurt more than being insulted. When someone insults you, at least they acknowledge you exist. But silence says, "You're not even part of this." Dinner was served. I barely touched it. The chicken was dry. The vegetables lukewarm. I moved food around my plate like it might give me something to do. I watched Ellis dance with Melanie, then with her mother, then someone's aunt. He never came to my table, not once. There's a kind of loneliness that creeps in when you're surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. That's the kind of loneliness that doesn't whisper, it roars, and yet no one hears it. The photographer passed my table twice, once with his camera raised, once with it lowered. Neither time did he stop. At some point, I noticed the bread I had baked still wrapped in parchment on the gift table, untouched, not displayed, just sitting there like an afterthought. And that's exactly what I'd become, an afterthought. I folded my napkin slowly, tucked it under the rim of my glass, and rose from the table. My legs felt heavier than they should have. I walked out without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. No one noticed. Walking through the lobby, I passed the desk where I'd picked up my name tag. I glanced down at it one last time. Bernice Elwood. No mother of the groom. No ribbon. Just a name. Just a ghost of a title I used to carry. And if you've ever felt that, like you gave your life to raise someone who now acts like you're a footnote in their story, you'll understand what I mean when I say something inside me began to close, not in anger, not yet, but in grief, a grief deeper than death, a grief that sounded like my own footsteps echoing down an empty hallway. Let me ask you something. Honestly, have you ever shown up to something with your whole heart, only to realize your seat had already been taken by someone else's priorities? If you have, you're not alone. Not even close. I drove home in silence. The wedding playlist still echoed in my head like a cruel aftertaste. I kept thinking of Charles, what he would have said. He would have marched right back in there and said, "That's my wife. The reason that boy can stand up there in a tuxedo is because she held him through croup, SATs, and his first heartbreak." But Charles was gone, and I was alone in the car, staring at the road, clutching the steering wheel a little too tight. The bread beside me had shifted on the seat and tumbled slightly. I didn't pick it up. When I got home, I didn't take off my dress. I just sat on the couch in it. The pearls at my wrist pressing into my skin. I stared at the wall, at the bookshelf, at the empty chair where Charles used to sit. I thought about everything I had given Ellis, every sacrifice I made, every chance I passed up, every comfort I delayed, because I believed love meant giving everything and asking nothing in return. And now it felt like that love had become a debt. I was being punished for collecting. The next morning, I packed the bread into the freezer. I figured maybe the library ladies would want some next week. People who still remembered how to say thank you. I folded the dress back into its bag, but something in me knew I wouldn't be wearing it again. Something shifted that night. Something irreversible. They didn't just forget to include me. They chose not to. And once you realize that, you don't beg to be seen. You start making plans to disappear. On your own terms. A week after the wedding, Ellis called. His voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. Like someone rehearsing lines they didn't believe. "Thought maybe you could come over for dinner," he said. "Just the two of us. Melanie's out with friends." I didn't ask questions. I said yes. I baked a tray of oatmeal cookies the way he used to like them, soft in the middle, crisp at the edges, tied them up in foil, wore the same cardigan I had on the day I brought him home from the hospital. It still fit, a little looser now. My fingers paused on the tiny buttons as I remembered swaddling him in a blue blanket in that same cardigan 29 years ago. The sky was gray when I drove to his house. Late winter clouds pressed down like wet wool. The roads were dry but empty. The neighborhood was tidy, manicured, predictable. The kind of place where everyone has matching porch lights and doorbell cameras. Ellis opened the door wearing a polite smile, a shirt tucked in too neatly, socks but no shoes. He hugged me, lightly, shoulders only, and said, "Kitchen's this way." I followed him down a hall too quiet. No smells of garlic, no bubbling pots, no roasting meat, just a table set for two, plates, silverware, and a bottle of red wine already uncorked, but no food, no napkins, just a small stack of papers at the center of the table, clipped, color-coded, and topped with a blue pen placed diagonally, like punctuation. I stood still. Ellis pulled out my chair. "Sit. We'll get to the food in a second." He poured the wine before I had answered, took a sip, then, casually, he gestured to the stack of papers, just something I thought we should have in place, for peace of mind. I didn't reach for them. I just looked. He continued, "It's a power of attorney form. Nothing dramatic. Standard stuff. I'd just be able to help if anything ever happened. Financially. Medical things. That kind of stuff. Everyone's doing it." He said it like he was talking about upgrading a phone plan. My eyes moved across the top page. Legal text. Dense. Cold. The kind of paper that doesn't feel like paper. It feels like distance. Like a transaction. Durable power of attorney. Immediate access. Financial decisions. Real estate. Medical consent. Nowhere on that page did it say mother. Nowhere did it say family. It said principal. It said agent. It said authorization. I picked it up, flipped to the signature page. The pen was already uncapped. I looked at Ellis. He was still smiling. But there was a flicker, just under the surface, a tension around the eyes. "No pressure," he said. "Take it home if you want. Just something to think about." I tucked the cookies into the corner of the table, still warm. He didn't touch them. We talked about nothing for 10 more minutes. The weather. His neighbors, some show I didn't know. He didn't ask about me. When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door, hugged me again, lighter this time, like I was something too fragile to press against. Back in my car, I sat with the engine off for a long time. The foil-wrapped cookies sat untouched on the seat beside me. Behind me, the porch light turned off automatically after 60 seconds. Like everything else, I didn't cry. I didn't even change clothes when I got home. I sat on the couch, coat still zipped halfway, hands in my lap like they belonged to someone else. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge and nothing else. That's when I went down to the basement. I hadn't been down there since the fall. The steps creaked beneath my weight. My knees ached. I switched on the single bulb hanging over the laundry machine. There, beneath a shelf of paint cans, was a cabinet. And inside the cabinet, the box, metal, heavy, covered in a fine layer of dust. Charles had told me about it before he died. If something ever happens, he'd said, you'll find what you need in here. But I'd never opened it, never had a reason, until now. The lid creaked open. Inside, everything was neat. Of course it was. Charles was methodical. Labeled folders, dividers, a small black notebook with handwritten entries. And at the very bottom, an envelope, my name, in his handwriting. My chest tightened just seeing it. I opened it slowly. It was a short letter. Bernice, you've always given more than you ever took. I know you'd never ask for help, even if you needed it. So I made sure you wouldn't have to. Not from anyone, especially not Ellis. Not because I don't love him, but because I know what the world does to people when they smell money. This isn't about distrust. It's about protection. For you, for the life we built. Don't tell him. Just be free. Charles. The folders detailed 2 brokerage accounts in my name, a portfolio of stock options, mutual funds, a rental property in Texas. Total value, just over $2 million. I stared at the number, closed the folder, then opened it again, just to be sure. Still didn't cry. What I felt wasn't relief. It was heavier than that. It was the weight of being seen, long before I knew I'd disappear. That night, I slept in the cardigan again. I lit the lamp in the kitchen and sat with the papers Ellis gave me. And I began to write, not what he wanted, but what I needed to say, not for him. For me, 3 days after I brought home Ellis's stack of legal documents, I got a call from a woman named Karen. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She used to work at the county courthouse before she retired. Her voice was cautious. Bernice, I'm not sure if I should be telling you this, but I saw your name on a petition, filed 2 days ago. Your son's listed as the petitioner. I paused. A cold, metallic kind of stillness blooming in my chest. What kind of petition? She hesitated. Guardianship. He's asking for full financial and medical control. Claims you've shown early signs of cognitive decline. I don't remember what I said next. Maybe nothing. Maybe just thank you. The line went quiet. And then the world did too. I stood in my kitchen, hand still holding the phone long after it had gone dark. I stared at the refrigerator, the floor, the wall. There wasn't a scream, no plates broken. Just this dull, vibrating silence that made everything suddenly look different. The wallpaper, the calendar, my cardigan draped over the chair. He wasn't just trying to manage my money. He was trying to erase me, officially, to the law, to the state, to the world. A woman declared incompetent doesn't get to say no. She doesn't get to keep her house, her accounts, her name on her own papers. Ellis wasn't asking for help. He was asking for permission to disappear me. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat at the table with a pen in my hand, staring at both sets of documents, the ones from Ellis and the ones Charles had left for me, the wine-red folders that spelled out my worth, and the beige stack that tried to strip it away. The next morning, I called Virginia Cooper. She used to be one of Charles's colleagues' wives. We hadn't seen each other since his funeral, but I remembered something she once said at a dinner party. The quietest women often leave the deepest marks, especially when they know how to read fine print. She picked up on the third ring. Bernice, she said, what took you so long? Her house hadn't changed, still smelled like lemon oil and something freshly baked. We sat at her kitchen table, warm sunlight touching the edges of the old tablecloth. I handed her the trust packet from Charles. She read every page, didn't interrupt, didn't sigh, just flipped slowly, eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. When she reached the final page, she looked up and said, "You have more power than most women ever get." She explained everything. The accounts were secure. The trust Charles built was legal, enforceable, and airtight. But only if I acted now, before Ellis's petition could be reviewed. "Do you want to name anyone in this?" she asked. I shook my head. "No one. Not right now. Maybe not ever." Virginia nodded once. "Then let's reinforce this. Your trust, your rules, not theirs." We spent the afternoon rewriting everything. She added layers of protection, clauses requiring 2 independent physicians to verify any medical incapacity, provisions that prevented court override without my written consent, asset locks, revocation clauses, everything that Ellis was hoping I didn't know how to do. By sunset, it was done. She handed me a pen. My hand trembled a little, not from fear, but from clarity. I signed every page, slowly, purposefully, not to fight Ellis, but to remember who I was before he made me feel invisible. I wasn't a signature waiting to happen. I wasn't a blank space on someone else's estate plan. I was Bernice Elwood, mother, widow, woman, still standing, still sharp, still mine. Virginia slid the documents into a thick envelope. "Keep it somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere close, but not obvious." I drove home as the sky turned purple over the lake. The wind pressed against the trees, but I felt calm, steadier than I had in months, maybe years. At the house, I tucked the envelope behind the dishwasher pods beneath the sink. No one ever touches those. I stood in the kitchen with the lights off, listening to the soft hum of the fridge, the creak of the beams in the ceiling. Then I whispered, as if Charles could hear me, "I'm safe now." And I meant it. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't someone's mother trying to prove her worth. I wasn't someone's target, or burden, or emotional liability. I was a woman who had just drawn a line, not in anger, but in ownership. Ellis had underestimated me, maybe because I wear soft sweaters and bake oatmeal cookies, maybe because I speak softly and don't raise my voice. But the thing about quiet women, we're the ones who remember everything. And when we rise, we don't slam doors, we lock them. The house felt different now, not colder, not lonelier, just emptied. Not of love, but of illusions. After I signed the trust, I gave myself 3 days. Not to process, I'd done enough of that, but to make a quiet exit. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ellis, not the neighbors, not even the mailman I'd chatted with for 15 years. I listed the house with a local agent under a private name and told her to keep everything discreet. She asked why I was selling. I just said, "It's time." She didn't ask more. People who understand grief also understand silence. The cabin sold in 6 days. It was fast, but then again, lakeside homes in Minnesota tend to go quick when they aren't tied up in probate or sentiment. I packed what mattered. The framed photo of Charles from our 25th anniversary, his tie crooked, his smile unfiltered. The recipe cards with my handwriting smudged from decades of flour. A chipped blue kettle that whistled like a tired old man. 1 suitcase of clothes. And a ceramic owl from the garden that never scared a single bird but always made me smile. Everything else, donated. I moved into a small bungalow tucked behind the public library on Maple Street. It had creaky floorboards, a crooked mailbox, and a view of nothing in particular. Perfect. The neighborhood was older, slower. The kind of place where front porches mattered more than garages, and people still nodded when they passed each other on the sidewalk. No one knew me here, and that was the point. I started showing up at the library a few mornings a week, just straightening shelves, wiping down the reading tables, occasionally helping someone find a biography they couldn't remember the title of. I wasn't on payroll. I didn't want to be. I just wanted to move. That's where I met the women. Not all at once. Not with loud greetings or scheduled meetups. They came in like I did, one by one, gently, Helen always carried a tote bag with old quilting magazines and brought lemon drops she never offered, but always opened. June arrived every Thursday with a thermos of peppermint tea and never took off her scarf, even in spring. And Margot leaned on a cane she didn't use until she reached the parking lot. Pure performance. We all knew. We didn't talk about our kids, not at first, not often, and never with bitterness, just in glances, in the way someone might say, "I used to make soup for two," or "that porch swing squeaks more now that no one's sitting in it." We shared silences, and that felt like enough. One afternoon, Margot asked if I wanted help with the garden bed behind the library. I said yes without looking at it. The soil was hard, winter-packed, like it hadn't been touched in years. We knelt in it anyway. Our knees complained, our backs cracked. We didn't stop. We planted basil, tomatoes, and a few sunflowers just because. We called it the quiet corner. No sign, no fanfare. But every week, someone watered it. Someone pulled weeds. Someone added a new stone to the border. I started to sleep better. Not longer, just deeper. Like my body finally believed I was somewhere it didn't have to brace. I still had the trust envelope, of course, tucked behind the dishwasher pods in my new kitchen. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. It wasn't a safety net anymore. It was a statement, a quiet one, a line that had already been drawn. Ellis hadn't called, not since the guardianship petition, not since I filed a legal response through Virginia to shut it down before it went anywhere. He knew. He knew the door had closed, and more importantly, that I had closed it. Sometimes I thought about calling him, not to reconnect, but just to say I wasn't angry. But then I'd remember that wasn't the point anymore. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for space, and I had found it. There's a strange freedom in no longer being needed, in no longer being asked to carry a weight no one will admit you've held. I wasn't anyone's hero. I wasn't anyone's scapegoat. I was just Bernice, reading paperbacks with cracked spines, making tea without waiting for someone to come home, laughing, quietly, at jokes no one else heard. One morning, I caught my reflection in the library's restroom mirror. I looked older, yes, but also clearer, like someone who had stopped waiting for an apology and started giving herself permission. Permission to rest, to exist, to be, not despite everything that had happened, but because of it. It was a Saturday morning when I saw his car. Just after I finished sweeping the front porch of the bungalow, the sun had finally pushed through the clouds after 3 days of stubborn gray. The air smelled like soil, wet and alive. At first, I didn't recognize it. A silver sedan parked by the curb, engine off. No movement, just sitting. Then the door opened. Ellis stepped out. He moved slower than I remembered, his hair a little thinner, his posture not as proud. He wore a gray hoodie and jeans that looked like they hadn't seen an iron in weeks. He didn't walk up right away. He sat on the front steps, just like he used to. Back when he was 10 and sulking after losing a board game, back when silence still meant he was thinking, not scheming. I stood at the screen door, watching. Then I opened it, took a few steps down, stopped just short of the railing. He looked up. "Hey, Mom." I nodded. He held out an envelope. "I'm not here for anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I said nothing. He looked down. I was overwhelmed. Melanie and we thought we were doing the right thing, planning ahead, protecting the future. But I let it go too far. He paused. The words hung in the air like dew that hadn't dried yet. I didn't come expecting forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. What I did, what it cost. He placed the envelope on the step beside him. Didn't push it toward me. Just let it sit there. Then he stood. I didn't move. Didn't reach for the envelope, but I did sit down. Not next to him. Not close. Just enough that the wood creaked under both of us. "I forgive you," I said. But forgiveness isn't a key. It doesn't reopen doors. Some of them stay shut, not from spite, just from understanding. He didn't argue. He nodded once, eyes glassy, jaw tight. He stepped off the porch, walked back to the car, didn't ask to stay, didn't look back. I watched him drive away, the tires humming against the road like a song with no melody. When the car turned the corner, I stayed seated. Not grieving, not relieved, just breathing. The envelope stayed on the step until the wind rustled it against my foot. I picked it up, not to open it, but to tuck it inside my coat pocket. Later, I placed it in a drawer I didn't open often, with old letters, dried lavender, and a photo of Ellis at 5, missing teeth, dirt on his face, joy unfiltered. I didn't hate him, but I no longer saw that boy when I looked at the man. And that, too, was a kind of peace. That winter came early. Snow arrived soft and uncertain, like it hadn't decided whether to stay. I watched it fall from my kitchen window while I stirred a pot of soup meant for one. The ceramic owl sat on the sill beside me. Charles's photo rested on the bookshelf across the room. The kettle whistled quietly, not urgent, not impatient. At some point that evening, I lit a single candle. No birthday, no celebration. Just a small act of light in a house no longer waiting for anyone. I poured a cup of tea, sat in the armchair with a quilt pulled over my legs. I didn't write a letter, didn't journal, didn't pray, just sat. And in that stillness, I felt it, something I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not sorrow, but sovereignty, not the kind you declare, the kind you live. Have you ever stepped away from someone, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself more? If this story touched a quiet place in you, you're not alone. And if you've ever been erased gently, politely, over time, I hope you know, you're still here, still whole, and your story isn't over.